Feeling okay, honey? Dr. Chen will be here in a few minutes. Then it's go time. Maya managed to nod, her throat feeling like sandpaper. Ready as I'll ever be. It was a lie, of course. How could anyone be ready to voluntarily have a part of their body removed? Fear was a cold knot in her stomach. It wasn't the fear of pain. She was a nurse. She understood pain, knew it could be managed. It was the fear of the unknown, of the irrevocable step she was about to take. She closed her eyes, and in the sterile quiet of the pre-op room, the reason she was here bloomed in her mind's eye, vivid and full of life. Leo Croft. He hadn't been just another patient. In a pediatric ward filled with children battling ailments too cruel for their small frames, Leo was a spark. For the better part of a year, he had been a fixture in her life, a small 7-year-old philosopher tethered to a dialysis machine 3 times a week. His skin had the pale, waxy sheen of chronic illness, but his eyes, a startlingly bright blue, missed nothing. Nurse Angel, he'd called her one afternoon, his tongue poking out in concentration as he sketched in a notebook. He'd held it up to show her a drawing of a superhero with a messy brown bun and a stethoscope, fighting off a giant, scribbled monster labeled the Bad Kidneys. That's you. Maya had felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the hospital's overzealous heating system. She'd laughed, taping the picture to the nurse's station where it remained, a beacon of sorts. She found herself rearranging her shifts to coincide with his dialysis schedule, found herself smuggling in comic books and sour gummy worms, his favorite contraband. They developed a routine of jokes and stories, a small pocket of normalcy in a life defined by medical procedures. She knew his father was a busy man, someone important, though the details were always vague. He was rarely there. In his absence, Maya and the other nurses had become Leo's surrogate family. They celebrated his half-birthday with a cupcake and a candle that wasn't supposed to be lit in the ward. They listened to his elaborate stories about space exploration and dragons. They saw the bright, brilliant mind and the loving heart trapped in a body that was failing him. The conversation that changed everything had been quiet, almost casual. She was at the nurse's station, updating charts, when she overheard Dr. Ramirez talking to a resident. "We're running out of time for Leo Croft," he'd said, his voice low and heavy. "He's been on the list for over a year, no viable family matches, and his blood type is a tough one. If we don't find a kidney soon..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. The words snagged in Maya's mind and refused to let go. That night, she couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned in her small apartment, the city lights painting stripes across her ceiling. The stack of bills on her kitchen counter, a testament to her formidable student loan debt and the ever-increasing cost of city living, seemed to mock her. She was just getting by, a world away from the kind of people who could afford the private rooms and top specialists Leo had. But illness was the great equalizer. It didn't care about wealth or status. It simply took. On a whim, born of desperation and a feeling she couldn't quite name, she opened her laptop. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. Living kidney donation requirements. Risks of unilateral nephrectomy. Recovery time for kidney donors. She read about the fatigue, the weeks off work she couldn't really afford, the permanent faint scar. She also read about the success rates. She read stories of strangers giving a part of themselves to save another. She looked at her own blood type card, tucked into her wallet. O negative. The universal donor. The same as Leo. It felt less like a decision and more like an answer. A question had been posed by the universe, and she was the only one in the room with her hand raised. The next morning, her voice trembling almost imperceptibly, she called the hospital's transplant coordinator. "My name is Maya Evans," she said, her words feeling solid and real in the quiet of her apartment. "I'm a nurse in the pediatric ward. I'd like to get tested as a potential donor for Leo Croft." The screening process was a gauntlet designed to weed out the impulsive and the unstable. There were blood tests and tissue typing, CT scans that mapped the geography of her insides. The most grueling part was the psychological evaluation. A kind-faced man with a notepad asked her questions that peeled back the layers of her life. "Why are you doing this, Ms. Evans?" "He's a great kid," Maya answered simply. "He deserves a chance to grow up." "Do you have a support system? This is a major surgery." "My friends, my colleagues." You understand you will receive no financial compensation for this? Maya almost laughed. The thought never crossed my mind. And what if it doesn't work? What if his body rejects the organ? Her breath hitched. Then at least I'll know I tried everything. She answered every question with a simple honesty that seemed to disarm the psychologist. She wasn't a saint or a martyr. She was just a person who saw a problem she could fix. When the call came a week later, confirming she was a perfect match, tears of pure, unadulterated joy streamed down her face. It felt like winning a lottery she hadn't even known she'd entered. Maya? Dr. Chen's voice pulled her back to the pre-op room. He was a small, brilliant man with an aura of supreme confidence that she found immensely comforting. It's time. As they began to wheel her bed out, another, smaller bed was wheeled in. Leo, looking impossibly small in his own gown, held out a folded piece of paper. It was his drawing of Nurse Angel. For good luck, he whispered, his eyes wide. Maya's heart felt like it would break. She took the drawing, her fingers brushing his. I'll see you when we wake up, she promised, her voice thick. And when we're all better, we're going to that park with the big slide. Deal? Deal, he said, a weak but genuine smile gracing his lips. That smile was the last thing she saw before the doors to the operating room swung shut, and the world dissolved into a bright, sterile white. 2 days later, she woke in a haze of morphine and relief. The first thing she felt was a deep, searing pain in her side, a profound reminder of the void she now carried. The second thing she felt was a wave of euphoria as the transplant coordinator told her the news. The surgery was a complete success. Leo was in recovery and his body was already accepting the new kidney. He was going to be okay. Maya wept, this time from a cocktail of pain, exhaustion, and overwhelming happiness. She had done it. She had saved him. She spent the day drifting in and out of a medicated sleep. Late in the afternoon, she was vaguely aware of the television droning on in the corner, likely left on by the cleaning staff. The chattering voices were just background noise until a particular name cut through the fog. A bold move today from reclusive financial titan Julian Croft, whose firm, Croft Holdings, single-handedly shifted the commodities market. Maya's eyes fluttered open. On the screen was a photograph of a man in his mid-40s with severe, handsome features, piercing dark eyes, and an expression of cold authority. He looked like he could command armies with a single glance. The chyron beneath his image read, Julian Croft's son receives life-saving transplant. The spoon in her hand clattered against her tray of lime jello. Croft. Leo Croft. Julian Croft. Her mind struggled to connect the two. The quiet, absent father of her favorite patient was this man? This titan of industry who, according to the anchor, owned a significant portion of Wall Street? It didn't seem possible. She felt a dizzying sense of vertigo, as if the floor had dropped out from under her. The purely personal, intimate gift she had given suddenly felt terrifyingly public. She had not just donated a kidney to a sick little boy. She had, without knowing it, inserted herself into the life of one of the most powerful and private men in the country. A week later, the physical pain in her side had subsided to a dull, constant ache. The psychological discomfort, however, was just beginning. She was still in her recovery room when a man who was not a doctor or a nurse entered. He was dressed in a suit that probably cost more than her car, with silver hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Ms. Evans, my name is Markham. I'm lead counsel for Mr. Croft, he said, his voice smooth as polished stone. He didn't ask how she was feeling. He didn't acknowledge the monumental thing she had just done. He moved with the predatory grace of a shark, placing a sleek leather briefcase on her bedside table. Mr. Croft is, of course, immensely grateful for your contribution, he continued, snapping the briefcase open, and he wishes to resolve the matter to everyone's satisfaction. He slid a handsome navy blue folder onto her blanket. Maya opened it. Inside, nestled on top of a thick sheaf of papers, was a cashier's check. She stared at the number, her brain refusing to process the string of zeros. $1 million. Resolve the matter? She echoed, her voice raspy. It wasn't a matter. It was a gift. Of course, Juan, Markham said, his smile tightening. A very generous gift. And this is a gesture to match. All it requires is your signature on the accompanying document. She lifted the check. Beneath it was a multi-page non-disclosure agreement. Her eyes scanned the dense legal text. Phrases jumped out at her. Complete and total confidentiality. No future contact, direct or indirect, with Leo Croft or any member of the Croft family. Refrain from any and all public or private discussion of the donation. A cold wave washed over her. They weren't thanking her. They were buying her silence. They were paying her off to disappear, to pretend she had never existed, to sever the bond with the child whose life she had just saved. No, she said, her voice quiet but firm. She pushed the folder back across the bed. No, I'm not signing this, and I don't want the money. Markham's professional veneer finally cracked. A flicker of genuine disbelief, quickly followed by annoyance, crossed his face. He was clearly a man unaccustomed to being told no. Ms. Evans, he said, his tone shifting, becoming patronizing. I think you should reconsider. This is a life-changing amount of money. It is more than generous. It's an insult, Maya said, her strength returning in a rush of indignation. Please leave. He stared at her for a long moment, reassessing. Then he snapped his briefcase shut, leaving the folder on her bed. I'll leave my card. I trust you will come to your senses. After he left, the room felt contaminated. The sterile, healing space was now tainted with the grime of a transaction. The beautiful, selfless act she had undertaken had been twisted into something ugly and transactional. Her first week back home was a blur of soreness and solitude. She moved slowly around her apartment, her body reminding her with every step of the piece of it that was missing. It was during that week that the phone rang, an unlisted number. She almost didn't answer. Hello? Is this Maya Evans? The voice was deep, resonant, and utterly devoid of warmth. It was a voice that didn't ask for things, but commanded them. Yes, this is she. This is Julian Croft. Maya's breath caught in her throat. She sat down heavily on her couch. Mr. Croft, she stammered. How is Leo? There was a beat of silence, as if the question was an irrelevant distraction. He is recovering. Markham tells me you rejected my offer. I don't understand. What is it you want? The question was so blunt, so devoid of humanity, it took her aback. Want? I don't want anything. I told your lawyer that. I wanted to help Leo. I care about him. I'd love to see him just to know he's really okay. Another cold pause. That will not be possible, Croft said, his tone flat and final. Everyone wants something, Ms. Evans. It's the nature of the world. So I suggest you stop this charade and name your price. We can have a new agreement drafted by the end of the day. Before she could form a response, he hung up. The dial tone buzzed in her ear, a sound of absolute dismissal. She sat in the silence of her apartment, the phone still pressed to her ear, feeling smaller and more powerless than she ever had in her life. When she was cleared to return to work, she felt a sense of relief. She craved the normalcy of her routine, the camaraderie of her colleagues. But something had shifted. The moment she was called into the office of Dr. Jennings, the hospital's chief administrator, she knew her ordeal was far from over. Dr. Jennings was a man who looked permanently flustered. He polished his glasses nervously as Maya sat opposite his large mahogany desk. Maya, he began, avoiding her eyes. Welcome back. We're all so proud of what you did. A truly selfless act. He cleared his throat. However, we find ourselves in a difficult position. He proceeded to explain that Julian Croft was not just a patient's father. He was the hospital's single largest private benefactor. The planned Croft Pediatric Wing was his pet project. And Mr. Croft was, in Dr. Jennings' words, very displeased with the current situation. He feels you're being opportunistic, Jennings said, stumbling over the word. Maya, you know how these things work. Perception is everything. We need you to just sign the papers. Be discreet. For the good of the hospital. Maya stared at him, aghast. For the good of the hospital? You want me to sign a gag order? You want me to take money to pretend I don't know a child whose life I saved right here in this building? It's a generous settlement, he insisted, his voice rising. It would solve all your financial problems. He was looking at a file on his desk, her employee file. He knew about her student loans. The implication was sickening. My financial problems are none of your business, she said, her voice shaking with rage. And they have nothing to do with this. This is about a little boy. This is about $1 billion donation, he shot back, his composure finally breaking. Don't rock the boat, Maya. I'm telling you as your superior and as a friend. Don't make an enemy of that man. She walked out of his office feeling betrayed by the very institution she had dedicated her life to. The whispers started the next day. Colleagues who had called her a hero now looked at her with a mixture of pity and suspicion. They had all heard something. The institutional gossip mill, fueled by pressure from the top, was grinding her up. Then came the public assault. A sleazy online tabloid, known for its sensationalist celebrity gossip, published an article. A friend sent her the link with a message. I'm so sorry, Maya. Don't read this. Of course she read it. The headline was a gut punch. Angel of Mercy or Gold Digger. Nurse who gave kidney to billionaire's son has history of financial trouble. The article was a masterpiece of character assassination. It spun her student debt into a narrative of desperate, predatory calculation. It quoted anonymous sources close to the family who suggested she had an unhealthy fixation on the child. It was accompanied by a grainy, long-lens photo of her taking out her trash, her face etched with stress. She looked haggard and unstable. Her world shrank overnight. The article went viral among a certain set. Her social media, once filled with pictures of friends and sunsets, was flooded with vile comments from strangers calling her a leech, a stalker, a parasite. At a coffee shop, she overheard two women at the next table. That's her, one whispered. The nurse who's trying to extort that rich guy. Maya fled, her face burning with shame. They were making her a villain in her own story. The next blow was delivered by a courier. A thick, intimidating envelope containing a formal cease and desist letter from Croft's legal team. It was filled with dense, terrifying legalese accusing her of a pattern of harassment and attempted emotional and financial extortion. It threatened a lawsuit that would not only bankrupt her, but also seek to have her nursing license revoked. She read it, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the pages. This was no longer just about silencing her. It was about destroying her. The final, most humiliating blow came one evening in the form of a loud, authoritative knock on her apartment door. She opened it to find two uniformed police officers standing in the hallway. Their expressions were flat, their body language heavy with bored authority. Maya Evans? One asked, not waiting for a reply. He handed her a folded document. Ma'am, you've been served. This is a temporary restraining order. You are to remain at least 500 feet away from Julian and Leo Croft at all times. That includes their residence, Mr. Croft's place of business, and the Metropolitan General Hospital, except for your scheduled shifts. Maya's mind went blank with shock. Restraining order? But why? I haven't done anything. He was my patient. I saved his life. The officer sighed, a look of profound impatience on his face. We hear a lot of stories, ma'am. All I know is a judge signed this. You violate it, you'll be arrested. Sign here to acknowledge receipt. He held out a clipboard. She stared at him, at his gun, at his badge, at all the symbols of a system that was supposed to protect people like her. And it was being used as a personal weapon by a man she had never even met. She signed the form, her hand numb. The officers turned and left without another word. She closed the door and slid down to the floor, feeling like a criminal in her own home. The axe fell 2 days later. She was called back into Dr. Jennings' office. This time, a woman from Human Resources was also present. The meeting was short and brutal. Maya, Jennings said, reading from a script, due to a recent investigation into a violation of hospital privacy policies, specifically discussing a patient's case with unauthorized personnel, we are forced to terminate your employment, effective immediately. It was a lie, a flimsy, transparent pretext. She had been fired because Julian Croft wanted her gone. She cleaned out her locker in a daze, the Nurse Angel drawing still taped inside. She took it down, folded it carefully, and put it in her pocket. As she walked out of the hospital for the last time, the place that had been her second home, she felt nothing but a vast, hollow emptiness. When she arrived back at her building, the final nail was waiting. Taped to her apartment door was an official-looking notice. An eviction letter. Her landlord, after years of being perfectly amicable, had suddenly discovered a minor technical lease violation. She was to vacate the premises in 30 days. She unlocked her door, walked into her living room, and sank onto the floor. She was holding her termination letter, her eviction notice, and a restraining order that barred her from the two people who gave her life meaning. She had lost her house, her home, her reputation, and the child she had sacrificed a part of herself to save. She put her head in her hands, and for the first time since the ordeal began, she broke down in great, racking sobs, her cries swallowed by the silence of the empty apartment. It was her friend Sarah, a fellow nurse who had refused to believe the lies, who threw her a lifeline. She had been calling for days, and Maya finally picked up. After hearing the full, sobbing story, Sarah was incandescent with rage. "No," Sarah said, her voice fierce. "No, we are not letting him do this. My cousin Ben, he's a lawyer. He's young, and he's a pit bull. He does pro bono work for cases he believes in. You are calling him. Now." A day later, Maya was sitting in the most chaotic law office she had ever seen. It was a tiny, cramped space overflowing with teetering stacks of books and files. Ben Carter was the opposite of the polished, reptilian Markham. He was in his late 20s with a perpetually rumpled shirt, intense eyes, and an energy that vibrated with righteous indignation. He listened to her entire story without interruption, his expression growing darker with every detail. When she finished, he slammed a book shut on his desk, raising a cloud of dust. "This is monstrous," he said, his voice low and furious. "This is a classic Goliath move. He thinks because he can buy the world, he can crush one good person. He's counting on you to break. He's counting on you to be scared and alone and to just disappear." He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers. "We can't sue him for money. That's what he wants. He wants to drag you into a financial war of attrition he'll always win. But we can fight for something else. We can fight for the truth." For the first time in weeks, a flicker of something other than despair ignited in Maya's chest. It felt foreign, almost painful. It was hope. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Ben smiled, a grim, determined smile. "First," he said, "we take back your story." Inside the sterile, minimalist expanse of the penthouse apartment that overlooked the city, Julian Croft was losing a war on a single front: his own son. Leo was getting stronger every day. The color had returned to his cheeks, and he had a new, boundless energy. But a shadow lingered in his eyes. "When can I see Nurse Angel, Daddy?" he asked for the 10th time that week. They were in his room, a space filled with every toy and gadget a child could desire. "She's busy, Leo," Julian said, his eyes on a stock market feed on his tablet. "You're lying," Leo said, with the unnerving perception of a child. "You don't like her. Why don't you like the person who saved me?" He pointed to the Nurse Angel drawing, now meticulously taped to his wall. Julian's gaze followed. The crude crayon superhero seemed to mock him from the wall. He had vanquished corporate raiders, crushed competitors, and bent markets to his will. Yet he was powerless against a child's simple, unwavering love for his nurse. He saw the genuine pain in his son's eyes, and for the first time a crack appeared in the fortress of his certainty. This was not a problem he could solve with money or threats. It was a problem of the heart. Guided by Ben, Maya agreed to a single television interview. It was with a respected journalist known for her tough but fair approach. Maya was terrified, but Ben's steady presence beside her was an anchor. On camera, she was not the hysterical, unstable gold digger from the tabloids. She was quiet, composed, and dignified. She told her story simply, without embellishment. She spoke of her bond with Leo, of her decision to donate, and of the shock of what came after. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry, she just told the truth. The journalist presented the facts. The check, the NDA, the termination, the restraining order. Then she asked the final question. What do you want to happen now, Ms. Evans? Maya looked directly into the camera, and it felt like she was looking for Leo. I don't want anything from Mr. Croft, she said, her voice clear and steady. I just want Leo to know that I think about him every day, and I'm so happy he's healthy. I will never, ever regret what I did. The interview was a bombshell. The public, who had been fed a narrative of greed, was now confronted with a story of profound grace and institutional cruelty. Stand With Maya exploded across social media. Stories from other nurses and former patients poured out, painting a portrait of the compassionate caregiver she truly was. The tide of public opinion turned with the force of a tsunami. Julian Croft, insulated in his tower, felt it. For the first time, his PR team couldn't control the narrative. He was no longer the powerful victim of an extortion plot. He was a billionaire bully. In a move of sheer arrogance, he decided to fight back with the only tools he knew: money and power. He scheduled a press conference at Metropolitan General to officially announce his multi-billion-dollar donation for the new Croft Pediatric Wing, a blatant attempt to buy back his public image. The hospital lobby was a circus of cameras and reporters. Julian stood at a podium, Dr. Jennings beaming sycophantly beside him. He was speaking about legacy and philanthropy when a stir at the back of the room drew everyone's attention. It was Maya. With Ben by her side, she had walked quietly into the lobby. She wasn't shouting or protesting, she simply stood there holding the faded crayon drawing of Nurse Angel. The press corps went into a frenzy. Cameras swiveled, flashes strobed. Julian's face, projected on a large screen behind him, contorted into a mask of pure fury. "Get her out of here," he snarled into the microphone, his voice a low growl. Security guards started moving towards her, parting the sea of reporters. But at that exact moment, a small voice cut through the chaos. "Maya!" Leo, who was supposed to be waiting in a quiet office upstairs, had heard her name. He came running into the lobby, a blur of motion. He saw her, and his face lit up with a joy so pure and absolute it silenced the entire room. He sprinted across the polished marble floor, dodging reporters and security guards, and threw himself into her arms, burying his face in her legs. "Nurse Angel, you came back!" Maya dropped to her knees, her arms wrapping around the little boy, holding him tight as tears finally streamed down her face. Every camera, every eye in the room was on them. Julian Croft stood frozen at the podium, a statue of impotent rage. He watched his son, his everything, clinging to the woman he had tried to erase. And in that moment, seeing the world through his son's adoring eyes, the entire cold, transactional edifice of his life crumbled to dust. He didn't see a threat or an opportunist. He saw a hero. He saw the truth of her gift and the profound, unforgivable ugliness of his response. The press conference ended abruptly. The story was no longer about a donation. It was about a reunion. Later, in a quiet lounge, the air was thick with unspoken words. Leo refused to leave Maya's side, holding her hand as if he feared she might vanish again. Julian Croft entered the room, looking 10 years older. The armor was gone. He was just a man. He walked over and stopped in front of Maya. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice raw, broken. "There is no excuse for what I did. There are no words. You gave my son the gift of life, and I tried to punish you for it. Thank you, Maya, for everything." It wasn't eloquent, but it was honest. It was the first true thing he had said to her. In the days that followed, Julian Croft moved with the decisive force he usually reserved for the stock market. Markham and his entire legal and PR team were fired. A scathing internal review was launched at the hospital, resulting in the immediate resignation of Dr. Jennings. Then Julian held another press conference. He stood alone at the podium. There was no arrogance, only a deep, weary humility. He publicly apologized to Maya Evans by name, detailing the campaign of harassment he had orchestrated. He announced he was withdrawing all legal actions and that his lawyers were working with hers to ensure she was compensated for her lost job and emotional distress, though he knew no amount of money could fix what he had done. Finally, he said, An act of grace like Maya's should be celebrated, not punished. It should be supported, not suspected. He announced the immediate formation of the Maya Evans Foundation, endowed with $2 billion of his own money. Its sole mission, to provide financial, legal, and emotional support for living organ donors, ensuring that no one who gave such a gift would ever have to face what she had faced. He had already offered the position of executive director to Maya. 6 months later, the sun was warm on Maya's face. The sound of children's laughter filled the air of a sprawling city park. She was pushing a giggling, energetic Leo on a swing, pushing him so high his feet seemed to touch the clouds. She was no longer a nurse. She was the head of a foundation that was already changing lives. Her name was now a symbol of hope and integrity. Julian approached, dressed not in a suit, but in a simple sweater and jeans. He watched his son, a genuine smile touching his lips. He and Maya stood together in comfortable silence for a moment. Two people from different universes, forever bound by the boy on the swing. "The first grants went out last week," she said quietly. "We're helping a teacher from Ohio donate to one of her students." "Good," he said. "That's good." There was no romance between them, and perhaps there never would be. The wounds were too deep. But there was something else, a shared respect, a quiet partnership, a strange, unconventional family forged in the crucible of a terrible mistake and a radical act of kindness. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the grass, the three of them stood together. The woman who gave, the boy who lived, and the man who had finally learned how to receive.